back in 2013, I came on here and talked about the Alex Smith trade. I wasn't a big fan of it at the time. I still am not. And the simple reason being, Alex Smith is not the type of guy that can take your team to a Super Bowl because of him and win it in part because of him. Just not happening. And after 4 years, Kansas City Chiefs fans, I think, realize, if they didn't already, that Smith is a decent game manager. He's kind of a sure hand, but he's not going to make a bunch of big splashy plays. Your offense lacks a lot of explosiveness, and at times, at least once a year when it really matters, that is going to jump up and bite you square in the ass. It did it in 2016, it did it in 2015, 2014, 2013. It's always the way it's going to be. So I find it interesting that the Chiefs finally came to this realization and said, hey, we feel like we have a team that isn't that far away, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. We have to go get a quarterback because Alex Smith isn't the guy to get it done. And how do you know Alex Smith isn't the guy to get it done? Because the Kansas City Chiefs traded up from 27 to 10, gave up a first-round pick in next year's draft to go get Patrick Mahomes, who was my number one quarterback on the board, who I thought had the best arm in the 2017 draft, but I still had a second-round grade on. I thought he was massively talented, but he needed a lot of work. But ultimately, the Chiefs were so desperate to get a strong-arm quarterback that can make the big plays that Alex Smith can, even if he can't necessarily play right away and shouldn't play right away, that this team was willing to trade up 17 spots and give up a first-round pick next year to go get that guy. That, to me, is a pretty damning statement about, thanks, Alex Smith, for making us relevant. Thanks, Alex Smith, for being consistent for what you are. Thanks for keeping us in the mix. But we know you're not the guy to ultimately get us to the dance and win it. I just find that fascinating. But when you look at this Kansas City Chiefs team, I will at least say this. The trade for Alex Smith did make a difference. He came in along with Andy Reid, and they helped turn things around. And I won't take that credit away from Alex Smith. He's been a steady, surefire, reliable hand for them, even if he hasn't been a great hand. And when you look at this team, they've got some things on paper that get you really excited about them. You know, Andy Reid is a really good head coach. He's a consistent guy. And to me, consistently, he gets a lot out of his teams, other than maybe the tail end of his run in Philadelphia. But that stuff happens. But in general, it's no surprise, and it shouldn't be a secret why most Andy Reid coach teams are in the mix year in and year out. And that's because this guy is really underrated as a head coach and is honestly one of the best head coaches in the National Football League. And if he did have a Lombardi trophy, it would validate him. And it's a shame because he shouldn't have to have that to be validated. I will defend him in this sense, is that Andy Reid is far better than at least 85, if not 90% of the head coaches in the National Football League. And I'd battle you out on that. He really is. And it's evident by the fact that so many of his teams are in the mix year in and year out. And he came into Kansas City year one and instantly turned them around and made them relevant, made them competitive, made them viable. And you look at some of the weapons they have. You know, you got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You've got a couple of really good weapons in the passing game. Defensively, you've got big playmaking type of guys like Eric Berry and Marcus Peters. You've got one of the best leaders on special teams in the National Football League. You've got a really good special teams unit. You're a team that doesn't turn the ball over a lot, meaning that you protect the football, you control the football. You limit the big momentum-changing plays for the defense and the opposing team because you just don't give them a lot of opportunities to change the momentum of the game. The Kansas City Chiefs do a really good job of kind of physicaling up with people and slowing the game down, muddying the game down, because they really don't have the explosive talent to be able to play any other style. But again, I give Andy Reid a tremendous amount of credit because they ultimately play to who they are. He does his best in a lot of cases to accentuate the positives and hide the negatives of his football team, and does a really good job of it. But there are some problems with this team in 2017. Andy Reid's game and clock management at times is just absolutely horrendous. And I think it's one of those things that really stands out about Andy Reid that prevents him from getting the credit that he honestly deserves. But I get it, because sometimes his game and clock management are terrible. The Chiefs' run defense in 2016 took a big step back, and I don't know how much better they got this offseason. If you're the type of team that wants to play that kind of close to the vest style, you've got to be able on defense to stop teams in the running game and make them one-dimensional. And the Chiefs just did not do a good enough job of that in 2016. It could be an area they struggle again this upcoming season. Then on offense, the vertical passing game is non-existent. And that in large part is due to the lack of arm strength and velocity of Alex Smith's right arm. Now, there are other things he could do well. He's a really good athlete. He can make big plays happen with his feet. And sometimes, frankly, I wish he would make more of them happen with his feet, because he can. He's a guy that doesn't take a ton of sacks. He's a guy that doesn't turn the ball over a ton. He's a guy that's pretty accurate in the short to intermediate area. But eventually, teams figure this out, and they realize this guy can't throw over 20 yards with any type of consistency. So it significantly shrinks down vertically and, frankly, horizontally as well, the amount of field that the opposing defense has to defend. And it means that for what the Chiefs do, they have to absolutely execute perfectly, or there's going to be problems. And again, it prevents the team from, at times where they need to make quick strikes, check down Alex isn't going to be able to get that done for you. He's the type of guy in that West Coast system of Andy Reid is going to be great at reading the defense and finding the open guy, hitting the first read or hitting the check down, and kind of moving you methodically 5, 10, 12 yards down the field at a time, which is okay during the regular flow and course of a game. But at some point in time, you have to be able to change a defense's perspective. And Smith just doesn't have the arm to do that. So again, I want to emphasize, there are positives to an Alex Smith, but he is also one of their biggest hindrances as to why they are not really the championship caliber type of team that maybe they could be. When you look ahead to this season, who could make a difference for this team? Well, they cut Jeremy Maclin, which was a bit of a surprise for me, but I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for this team, because I envision them finding a way to get the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands a lot more. This was a guy that when he touched the ball last season, he was a threat to score every single time. Kick return, punt return, receiver, runner. He could do it all. And it'll be intriguing to see how much more dedicated on a consistent basis Andy Reid and the Chiefs offense is to getting the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands. But I think a guy that could really make a difference for this team is going to be Kareem Hunt at the running back position. Jamal Charles is gone. Spencer Ware hurt his PCL. He's going to be out of, I would assume, a few weeks to start the season. You can say, yeah, maybe you got somebody like Charkandrick West, but I look at Kareem Hunt, and I look at him as being a perfect fit for Andy Reid's offense, and I view him as the type of guy that could come in and make a difference and help control the clock and, really help the Chiefs kind of impose a physical will on other teams, help them kind of muddy up the game and slow the game down and tighten the game up. So I think he's a huge key factor for them, their third-round pick out of Toledo. I really, really do. When I look ahead to this Chiefs schedule, it's interesting to me because I think they could get off to a slow start, which is sometimes a thing that Andy Reid teams do. They could take a little while to get their footing. They could take a little while to figure things out. There's a 3-week stretch, weeks 5 to 7, that I think is particularly difficult for them. They go to Houston, then they host Pittsburgh, only to go the next week to Oakland. Those are 3 playoff teams from last year. You look at Pittsburgh and Oakland, those are teams that are potentially going to be battling it out for a 2 seed in the AFC. The Houston Texans have one of the best defenses in the National Football League. None of these games are easy for the Kansas City Chiefs. And if they go into this 3-game stretch and do what they could potentially do, which is lose 2 of them, if not all 3 of them, it really sets them behind the 8 ball early on in the season and leaves them a very big hole to try and dig themselves out of. But thankfully for them, I think their end of season schedule is favorable to them to where you could get that Andy Reid type of run, which we've seen this Andy Reid teams over the years do, where they can go on a big stretch of winning 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games in a row. You look at weeks 12 through 17, the last 6 games, they host Buffalo, they go to the Jets, they host Oakland, host the Chargers, host Miami, and then go to Denver. So the last 6 games, I'll break this down. Hosting a Buffalo team they are better than, then going to the Jets to play a team that is clearly in tank mode, to come back home the next week and have home field advantage at Arrowhead against the Raiders, where they're going to be pumped up for that game. You've got then the Chargers coming to Kansas City, and the Chiefs are a better team than the Chargers. Then you've got Miami coming to town, and the Chiefs can beat the Dolphins. And then week 17, the Chiefs could be playing for something important, and the Denver Broncos may be a complete mess at quarterback and might be ending a disappointing, meaningless season. There's a chance that even if the Chiefs start off like 4-6, they could win their last 6 games and still kind of slide into the playoffs. And that's kind of what I envision happening here. I think the Chiefs are still good enough to make the playoffs like they have been the past few years, but not do much damage once they get there. I think they're like a 10-6 type of team, and they'll finish second, maybe a couple of games behind the Oakland Raiders in the AFC West. And Chiefs fans will look at this year, get kind of antsy about Patrick Mahomes, and hope to God that 2018 is the beginning of the Patrick Mahomes era.